We have a woman here who has done very poorly on her first college test, much to her surprise. Now, for our purposes, the question is how she will interpret this experience and the kinds of stories she tells herself about it, which will determine what comes next, the outcome of her college career. So let me go back to my example of the college students. The one on the left is the one who's done poorly on the test. I've called her Megan. And on the right, we have a different student named Sarah. And for the sake of the argument, let's assume that their objective circumstances are identical. Both have done very well in secondary school, get to university, and do very poorly on this first test. The key is how they interpret that. The woman on the left is caught in a pessimistic thought cycle, that she makes the assumption that she is a failure, she cannot make it at college, and as a result, that leads to stress and a lack of effort for the next test. That why should she try, given that she doesn't have what it takes? Well, if you don't study for the next test, you're not going to do well on it. That will lead to further bad grades, which then reinforces this original interpretation. But Sarah, the woman on the right, has a very different interpretation. She says to herself, this is a wake-up call, I'm fine, I can do this, I just need to learn how to study differently in college. That leads to more effort in studying for the next tests and less stress. It pays off with better grades on the next test, which then reinforces this more positive interpretation of her situation. So the question is, basically, how do we get people to think more like Sarah, the optimistic thinker, and less like Megan, the pessimistic thinker? So, back to our mythical college students. How can we get them to redirect their stories? We took a sample of college students who were not doing well and were quite worried about their performance. These were all first-year students. And our assumption was that these were students who were at this kind of narrative fork in the road. They could go down the negative thinking path or go down the positive thinking path, but they were certainly at risk for the pessimistic one. And we did a very simple intervention to try to redirect their stories. We simply gave them some statistics suggesting that many college students do poorly at first, but do better as time goes by. And we also showed them some videotaped interviews of upper-class students who reinforced this message by saying that, yeah, you know, when I was a freshman, I really did poorly, but then I learned how to do better, and now my grade point average is much higher. There was a randomly assigned control group of students who did not get this information, so we could track the effects of this prompt to change their stories. And it had some pretty good effects, that the ones who got the story prompt, their grades actually did improve compared to the students in the control group. And they were also less likely to drop out of college. Now, keep in mind, this was a 30-minute intervention, and it had these long-term effects. And I think the way it did so was, at least our assumption is, to just bump people onto the optimistic track of thinking, which becomes self-sustaining.